Racing games are a realm so vast. Experiencing each and every installment out there can be a real undertaking. I like to think that I've been blessed enough to have a solid few under my belt, but there's always those that slip through the cracks. There's one in particular that sequels one of the greatest racing games ever made that's right up my alley, and yet I put it off for fear of it not living up to the hype. Need for Speed Carbon had an inachievable obstacle in its path, surmounting its well-endeared predecessor Most Wanted's iconographic status, and that's a task that I don't wish upon anyone. Carbon bravely carried over a near-identical skeleton to its older brother, with many of its core gameplay being derivative of the concepts found in Most Wanted, yet at the same time, Carbon's twist on the racing game as we knew it, and tools in which to accentuate the era's Need for Speed formula, were enough to make this experience more than just the Most Wanted sequel. Near on 20 years later, it's about time for me to dive into Need for Speed Carbon and give you my first-timer's review and see just how well it holds up in 2024. But first, I have to talk about the sponsor of today's video, RaceMax Pro. Look, let's face it, both you and I love cars, and RaceMax Pro has you covered with fully licensed and detailed cars, featuring cars like the BMW M8, Camaro ZL11LE, the brand new Nissan Z, and some others that I've never seen in a racing game before, such as the M4 CSL and Rizvani Beast. All of these cars can be unleashed on the go, as RaceMax Pro is 100% free and available on iOS and Android. So while you're on the fly or just chill on the couch, you can experience all of the modes on offer, such as drift, drag, or street racing, to keep you covered no matter what you're into. There is a ton of content on offer, my personal favorite inclusions being the skill events, which really test your mettle with challenging objectives to see if you can be the ultimate racer. Single player content is plentiful, but if you want to group up with your friends or players worldwide, RaceMax Pro also has you covered with a heated and competition-fierce multiplayer to get the rivalries flowing. All of those cars that I mentioned at the beginning can also be personalized to your heart's content with a built-in livery and decal editor to truly harness your creative automotive vision. You can download RaceMax Pro right now using that QR code on screen or the link at the top of the description. And to make things even better, hop on into their official Discord to connect with other racers and meet new friends. Thank you so much once again to RaceMax Pro, and back to the video. There's a gaming phenomenon which has become famous over time when it comes to sequels, and it all has to do with impact. Think about God of War to Ragnarok, Breath of the Wild to Tears of the Kingdom, Most Wanted to Carbon. It's the age-old principle of revolution versus evolution. There's an undeniable impact that Most Wanted or any of the other revolutionizers will, no matter what, have the upper hand on. And this leaves the second game, the Evolver, with an immense amount of baggage. This baggage is 9 times out of 10 going to dampen the release of that Evolver. It's a shame, as some of these second installments actually improve upon that revolutionizer and are technically better games, but that emotional impact is gone. I preface all of this as I firmly believe this to be the #1 reason why so many people, including myself, tend to undermine Need for Speed Carbon. If Most Wanted never came before it, and instead this was the sequel to Underground, Carbon would have had near enough that exact same impact. It's actually quite funny. Because of the fact that I just replayed Most Wanted about a month ago, the mindset which I come into playing Carbon with is not far off of how most would have felt back in 2006. It's because of this that I make it clear, just as a nature of mindset, I'm going to be drawing a lot of comparisons between the two games as I go through and review Carbon. Something that I think is quite essential, as it is a direct sequel. As a sequel then, and from an initial impressions point of view, what strikes me about Carbon? First and most importantly, is that while most of the skeleton that frames Carbon is near identical to its sibling, the difference in presentation and themes the two games convey is night and day. Quite literally. Most Wanted visually is bright, dour, and quite warm and yellow in its color tonality. Carbon takes the exact opposite approach. It's dark, high in contrast, and very cool with a far more blue feel. Most Wanted by design has a far larger presence and emphasis on police, while Carbon is about nightlife, street racing, and tuning. Not to say that both games don't share many of these same elements, but the approach taken to which end of the spectrum each one showcases is vastly different. It's not all visual themes either, with Carbon taking a narrative approach which focuses on building a crew and working as a team, diametrically opposing that solo and personal narrative that came before. Carbon does so much with the format that was set that it makes you fall in love with the exact same things that I like about Most Wanted, yet in entirely new ways that I hadn't imagined before. And that is exactly what a perfect sequel should do. If Carbon was just simply Most Wanted 2, not only would it have none of the impact of the original, it wouldn't have done anything new with it either, simply reiterating what we've already experienced in maybe a slightly different form. To really appreciate just how brilliant Carbon is, diving into the pieces which make it whole is really necessary. And for me, the best place to start would be with its cars. From the offset, Carbon's approach to cars is very different. There's an even larger emphasis to them, while still carrying over what made people love Most Wanted. The classic formula of start in slow car and work your way up to fast car remains very well intact. Yet what I've always loved about the Need for Speeds of this vintage is that even your starter car gets the same love as a Murcielago. Black Box certainly loved their cars, and they knew that you would too, so giving the Brera a ludicrous exhaust note alongside not skimping on any of the customization makes you fall in love with your wheels no matter where you are in the game. Now, speaking of this car list itself, well, yeah, sure, it's not massive by any means. Every single choice here is spot on. It's also actually quite a different list to that of its brother. Not just larger, but far more diverse, giving you a plethora of exotic rides, such as the Koenigsegg CCX and Pagani Zonda. I had no idea these were even in the game beforehand, so all of this shocked me. Kitting it out and making it yours was, at the time, debatably the best in the series. The same basic principle for body kits, wheels, and vinyls, and all of that jazz was identical to Most Wanted, but then they throw Autosculpt in the mix. It's a shame that EA has ditched Autosculpt in recent entries, as totally sculpting your own stylized body kits adds that next level of depth to personalization, as it's no longer just set brands' body kits. No, it's yours, and that's just damn cool. The upgrade system takes the bread and butter tiered system that we're all familiar with and gives you that extra layer of depth with the ability to tune the characteristics of each part. If you wanted a turbocharger to have more mid-range punch, you could absolutely do that. These little tweaks are what made these upgrades so much more than just a one-size-fits-all, letting you complement each car's strengths and counteract their weaknesses. This same concept of adding depth is where Carbon truly shines. While most of its main concepts are carried over, there is that extra layer of complexity and nuance which, as I said earlier, makes you fall in love with the same features that you already adored from the last game, in an entirely new way. The last thing for me to touch on with these cars are the physics. The black box style of physics has become somewhat of a legend as time's passed, and while I absolutely do love the way the cars handle, it is in no way free from criticism either. 80% of the time, it's completely natural and second nature to just get into the groove, which is where these physics thrive. But on the off occasion, you get hit with the realization of, holy damn, this turn in response does not match up. Now, I actually don't think this is an entirely bad thing. If a physics model is too simple, it just gets a little boring to me. I like my games with a little bit of edge to them, and that alone makes it endlessly satisfying when you get deep into that groove and just feel on rails. Though, I do have a mini rant here. I see countless times, through comments of both my videos and around the community, that this black box style is far superior to that of the brake to drift methodology that Hot Pursuit and a lot of the supercar era games highlighted, because they aren't realistic. Do I really have to remind you guys that this is the same game in which drafting helps you corner, and front-wheel drive cars can just drift on command, and you have a button to slow down time and break the laws of physics. Come on, let's be real. Do I give half a GameCube about realism and Need for Speed? No, it's blooming Need for Speed. I'm one of very few that can realize both of these concepts for driving physics are fantastic in their own regard, and it all comes down to which suits the game that you are developing, and how well that you execute it. You spend too long whining about which is more realistic and the good old days were better, that we start to gaslight ourselves into believing arguments which aren't even true. Anyways, now that I've got r/Need for Speed typing up a storm, I want to highlight again personality. Through a sense of speed, through audio design, and through camera work. Carbon may not have been the first to capture this identity, but it does so in its own charming way, and that's the biggest compliment that I can give Carbon's cars. Now, I've said plenty already about just how behemoth the shoes for Carbon to fill were following Most Wanted, and arguably the piece of the game where this was the largest undertaking was through its campaign. Let's be blunt. Most Wanted back in 2005 was properly mind-shattering through its introduction of FMV cinematics, a grungy and edgy storyline, simple yet well-executed premise, and most of all, some of the most cohesive gameplay to tie everything together. Most Wanted was the revolution, and so the torch was passed down to Carbon to evolutionize this formula. So did it? Well, I think the best way to review Carbon's career is to reminisce as we go through from the beginning. And what an intro that this is. Carbon is, of course, a direct sequel to Most Wanted, something very uncommon these days. We pick up as the same protagonist as in Most Wanted, who I'll call Ricky, to keep things simple. Ricky is still on the run after the ending of Most Wanted left him with a nationwide bounty on his head and his wheels, and we open as he cruises into Palmont City. A flashback soon dawns on us. And thankfully, these oh-so-appallingly charming FMVs return to show us, who are y'all? Whatever, as we cut to the start line of a race, in which the woman from seconds ago showcases a very prominent red bag. The color palette chosen for Carbon does wonders to accentuate important components of the cinematics and plot with this neat red hue, in perfect contrast to the blue palette in which the rest of these films have been drenched in. Mid-race, everyone gets blasted by an EMP, except for us for some reason. Oh no, it's the plot ghosts all over again. That same red bag from earlier gets tossed into our car as we jump ship down an alley and down the highway. The end. Huh? Pay this flashback no mind, I guess, since we can't really make heads or tails out of it at this rate. Time to flash forwards to current day and, okay, I'm not gonna lie, it's a pretty sweet touch having Cross come back in, exclaiming that he's back, and asking you, how you been, at the end of this chase. It's a direct call out to both you, the player, and Ricky, and really shows the emphasis on this game's demographic, which would be the Most Wanted fanbase. The chase itself is fantastic. It's a brilliant gameplay demo of how exactly Carbon shakes up your expectations from Most Wanted. Twisty canyons, dark, moody atmosphere, and neat obstacles such as trucks in your path. This acts as a mirror to Most Wanted's introductory sequence, which was the opening race, eagerly diving into the racing atmosphere, while in Carbon, you're running away. Cross's evil monologue is interrupted by a set of racers who roll up alongside. I sure hope they're nice people.
I don't remember asking for your help, Croc.
Oh, God, I'm so glad that the cheese is running at full capacity. It's wonderful. I want to point out again, the strong emphasis on this gentleman's red coat. Anytime you see red, it's a very clear flag to pay attention, and using colors to tell a character's role in each scene. Mr. Redcoat's name is Darius, and he sure seems to pull rank, immediately exerting his superiority over Cross. I found this to be a great way to show the returning Most Wanted players that the guy you once feared, yeah, he's nothing anymore. There's a new boss in town. Darius recognizes us, and without hesitation pays our full bounty. What a nice guy. A lady named Nikki shows up and reams us out. Bro, what did we do? So now we have two people we seemingly never met before, all over our ass for something. Look, not my fault I got a clean stanky leg. Darius gives us the gist, and it finally clicks that we were the racer all of those years ago, which took off with that revered red bag, and tells us to make it up to him by taking out the racers who run each of Palmont's territories, who of course, just so happen to be the losers who got suckered by that EMP blast. Of course, Darius forces Nikki to show us the ropes of racing and how it's done here in Palmont, and with full unamused emoji flair, she begrudgingly agrees. Anyways, Nikki takes us down to meet that dog Neville, the monkey.
I'm the monkey!
We'll get more into Neville in a second. As for now, we have a first car to pick. Carbon's gameplay and themes are very centered around three classes of cars: tuner, exotic, and muscle. There may only be 3 cars to choose from, but the choices are great, and highlighted with touches such as playing music which fits the theme of each discipline. Muscle cars using rock and American music, exotics having a techno-electronica focus. I went with the Brera. Sorry, sir, and went down the exotic path for the start. Your introductory race with Nikki shows you Carbon's most unique addition to the gameplay loop: wingmen. There's 3 types of wingmen: blockers, drafters, and scouters. Blockers do their best to slow down your opponents by, guess how? Drafters give you a massive advantage in straight line speed and even cornering ability if you're close enough behind their slipstream range. And lastly, scouters will go ahead of you and scout for shortcuts and the fastest route to the finish line. Wingmen are such a great idea, and a great way to spice up the existing tried and true event structure that Most Wanted set. While I personally never use scouts all that much, I found drafters to be exceedingly useful, especially on speed trap events. They also fit quite thematically well with Carbon, as the whole story is about rebuilding a team, and being able to display this through gameplay is a really sweet touch of gameplay storytelling. That and each one is a whole cutscene showing themselves and their character traits off. My favorite being Sal, who is the biggest little pleading tsundere out there. These wingmen are just pretty damn funny. Like Neville, who once we wrap up absolutely starts flaming the pursuing police.
Coffee grinder, baby.
Bro, relax, he's already dead. This acts as our tutorial for how police work in Carbon. And while the race gameplay has some great mix-up compared to its predecessor, the police, well, they don't. Now, of course, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And this may just be a placebo on myself, but I found Carbon's police to not have the same wow factor as its older brother. All of the same great mechanics such as pursuit breakers and cooldown spots are still here, but the AI, at least to me, doesn't have the same aggression, though they do sometimes have a few incidents. Now, is this a bad thing? I don't actually think that it is. Carbon is less about the thrill of cops versus racers, and more thematically structured around the concept of racing and building a crew. The impact of police is dampened simply because this is the same approach that was done beforehand. As I've said before, if instead it was Carbon which introduced these concepts and police skeleton, this would have been the greatest thing since sliced bread. As a hand-me-down then, is it still great? Yeah, you bet it is. It just doesn't have the same impact that it does in Most Wanted. Once we lose the police, it's time to head on down to our main hideout so Neville can show off his power to spin. The world is now your oyster. And it's time to get out racing and claiming territory. Unlike in Most Wanted, where you had to complete a certain checklist of objectives before challenging the next blacklist member, Carbon instead wants you to recapture a certain amount of territory to gain the attention of a racer who helms that zone. You do so by winning events. Win enough, and you'll capture little segments of each zone. It's quite literally a Carbon copy of GTA San Andreas turf system. Hell, if you give it enough time, you'll even have rival crews come challenging you to reclaim their territory. The events on offer are great, though surprisingly, considering this game's more racer-focused career, there isn't as many. You've got Checkpoint, which pits you through a checkpoint-to-checkpoint route throughout Palmont against the clock. This is the only solo event type in the game, and functions pretty much as a time trial. It's a strange choice considering the focus on having a crew to race alongside, so racing alone almost makes you feel naked. Circuit and Sprint are exactly as they say on the tin. Circuit or point-to-point races a la every racer out there. Though I did really find myself loving the dynamic that both wingmen and shortcuts bring to what is the most bread and butter mode possible. Really helps spice things up. Drift brings me back to the underground days. It dramatically boosts the slideability of your car, allowing you to pull off some great sideways action, rewarding you for getting close to the walls and carrying high speed. I do have one complaint about Drift though, and I swear, near every Need for Speed game is guilty of this. They're just too damn easy. You will never, ever have a hard time being leagues ahead of your competition, which to me kills a lot of the mechanical intrigue of drifting. Now lastly, for the quote, standard modes would be Speed Trap. Speed Trap is badass. I've said it before and I'll say it again. This kind of thing has just been lost to time. You never see it these days, which is a shame, because it's properly fun. You'll go out on a set route with a certain number of speed cameras along the path, and your goal is to tally up the highest combined speed. I actually found some of the late game speed traps properly challenging. That's also probably because I had a thing for bringing underpowered cars and trying to make up that difference with the power in Drafter. Now, the gimmick of Carbon is the addition of canyons, and I'm not gonna lie, this might be one of my personal favorite additions to a sequel I have ever tried. The fact I started watching Initial D not long before playing through this may have had a slight influence, but hot damn, these are just the sickest thing. There's two modes for typical events, and then one more which I'll get into later in the video. Canyon events have both drift and race variants. They take the standard format for races and drift events, and just drape it over an entirely new way of driving. You can now fall off cliffs and die? The roads are narrow and twisty. This is just the best. We may have detoured a wee bit from the main plot, but we'll get right back on track with Wolf. Once you've started taking over territory in a racer's zone, you'll get a little teaser of how they act and what their crew's theme is, as the leader themselves makes their presence known. Take over a whole zone and you'll get these stupidly 2000s in the best way possible character introductions. Look, name me a racing game out these days that can match this. They've just got stupendous charm. And finally, we get, without a doubt, the greatest part of Carbon, Canyon Duels. These are a lot less prevalent than the blacklist rivals of Most Wanted, and I firmly believe that that goes wonders to enhancing the effect and excitement when it's finally time for the next. In terms of how these are to play, I'm not even joking when I say this might be some of the most fun I've had in a racing game ever. The premise isn't just some generic point-to-point or circuit. You'll have to vehemently fight down downhill, remaining as close to your opponent as possible to rack up a score. Once runs have been completed, you swap roles and try to outdrive that same rival, staying as far away as you can. The intensity of watching your personal score get run down faster and faster as you approach the finish line to only just by the skin of your teeth claim victory is blummin' unreal. The fact that Need for Speed has abandoned this style of racing is appalling to me, as these are properly fantastic to play through, though it is horrifying to see, no, get it away, stop! Once you wipe whatever the hell that expression is off Wolf's smug face, he is down and out for the count. The zone you fought so hard to take over is all yours now, and with that, more wingmen offer up their services, alongside their recount of the event which took place in the opening flashback. This time being Colin, who gives us a crucial piece of information. That red bag that we were tossed was switched out for another right before the exchange. At this point, the way Carbon's career has been structured is fully laid out for you. You'll have a few more racers to dethrone, and the pieces of the flashback puzzle to put together, but all of the game's main loop has been revealed. I'll touch on each one briefly so we get the general gist of the story and my perspective. The next, of course, being Angie, who looks nothing like her FMV counterpart. She runs a muscle car focused crew, and this is a great opportunity to build a handling focused car and just whoop them all in the corners. As long as you have a drafter, you got nothing to worry about. There's a slight interjection which shows that Darius has been using us? Who would have guessed? I mean, come on, really, you don't pay off someone's $150,000 bounty and just sing Kumbaya. No. They're indebted to you. Using us or not, we have no choice but to face Angie and dethrone that charger which, dude, I mean, we're in the canyons, did it ever really have a chance? With the easiest canyon duel set and done, we get in touch with Samson, who's the gentle giant type, chill dude, and even more so, when it's revealed that it was a police officer who helped us escape. Well, butter my butt and call me a biscuit. Things are really spicing up now, aren't they? Taking down the next racer, Kenji, is said and done with really quickly. Once him and his RX-7 are out, our next wing woman meets up with us and gives us the smoking gun. Well, almost literally. The SWAT were hired to use EMP-capable guns to take out our opposition, and just not us. We're not missing much from the flashback incident, and it's sure that all will be revealed when we take down our final opponent, Darius. The road to Darius is plenty of fun. Carbon's progression is typical Need for Speed ace, and you'll get a good taste of some really slick rides here. The intensity of the events really starts to creep up too. This ain't like the beginning where you'll be smoking everyone. Your mettle is going to be tested, and I love it. The final confrontation with Darius is here, and his confidence is very clearly a front. Under that smile, he's crumbling under the pressure. In his anger, he asks Cross to tackle us and pin us down, stealing our car, forfeiting us from the whole game, it seems like. It all seems over when Nikki rolls up, and Cross tosses her the keys to our handcuffs? Oh, little cutscene shows us that Nikki pulled out the Game Sharks and was playing 4D chess over here. She made a deal with Cross beforehand. After all, Cross is now a bounty hunter. His loyalty is bought. With Ricky free and Darius' plan revealed, it's time for the real showdown now. We enter into a boss gauntlet of sorts, having to take down all of the racers that we fought in a series of honestly pretty damn great races, all before the one-on-one. I don't know what Darius put in that alright, but my damn Koenigsegg was really pushing to keep pace. This is a real damn final boss race. Everything about this, the culmination of the story coming together, the setting and theme of these final events, the legitimate challenge, the mid-race banter, it's nothing other than the cream of the racing game crop. And this may be a hot take. I, without a semblance and doubt in my mind, prefer this to the showdown with Razor in Most Wanted. It's a very different kind of revenge. One that comes from a whole crew of racers who've been done over countless times. Instead of a personal one-on-one grudge for taking your car, the beef that we have with Darius runs far deeper to me. The conclusion here is very satisfying. We get the keys to his fabled R8, the woman that he manipulated is on our side, and he blasts off into the distance in a Jag. The end, bro, can these Need for Speed games stop ending so damn fast? Oh my god. And that's Carbon. Look, coming into this, I heard that this was ludicrously short, but I'd have a good time, and I don't necessarily see that. Well, sure, Carbon isn't the longest racing game out there, and sure, it may not be as content-dense as its older brother, yet what's here more than scratches the itch for a bangin' Need for Speed game. Give me the choice between 10 hours of absolute bliss and 30 hours of meh, and I'm taking the former every day. This was a different era of racing games, one that I severely miss. Carbon wasn't designed for you to come back week after week for a multi-year period. You played through it, spent a few weeks on it, and then you moved on to the next game in your list. Sure, maybe you did come back to it a few times, but that experience was designed to be there for you right in the moment, and it's brilliant at that. This storyline, while cheesier than Domino's, has some reasonable merit behind it, and a narrative that's quite satisfying to put together as you find out more backstory. For this genre of game, there's some pretty respectable writing chops behind it, and the actors who portray the characters in all of their 2006 glory are wonderful. For everything I've said just now about Carbon's story, the game remains as a brilliant time capsule of a style lost to time, and it's a great one at that. I want to bring back the title of this video and answer that very question. Does Need for Speed Carbon hold up in 2024? Well, it's a bit of a tricky question. As a racing game experience, and as a remnant of its era, yes, without question. But does it blend in with what racing gaming has become today? Hell no. And that's not a bad thing. Carbon was dated from the get-go, but not in a harmful way. It's dated in being just so pompously of the era that even on release it would have been seen as egregious. This character and charm is what I adore about these games. They stick out like a sore thumb. They make people upset with just how in their face they are. As I said at the end of the story run-through, Carbon is a time capsule, one that encapsulates a very special era of car culture, music, pop culture, and most importantly, video games. Carbon, alongside its brother Most Wanted, undoubtedly sit hand in hand as some of the greatest racing games that I've had the pleasure of playing. But do they hold up in 2024? No, and that's precisely why we love them so much.